A country that spans 11 time zones is hiding things in places no satellite can reach, and no journalist survives long enough to confirm. Russia doesn't just have secrets, Russia has entire categories of reality it has decided the rest of the world will never see. The things on this list are not theories, they are not folklore. Every single one of them is documented, photographed, and sitting in plain sight, which somehow makes all of it worse. Because when something is real and Russia still refuses to explain it, that silence carries a weight that no conspiracy theory ever could. Stay with me, because by the time we reach number 1, you're going to understand why certain governments don't just hide information, they hide the questions themselves. Let's go.
Number 13. Moscow Black Smoke Ring 2014. It appeared above a village on the outskirts of Moscow, and nobody had a single explanation that held for more than 5 minutes. A perfect black ring, hovering in the sky, rotating slowly on its own axis, holding its shape with a geometric precision that smoke simply does not achieve on its own. Residents filmed it from the ground as it sat there, motionless, flawless, deliberate, for nearly 3 minutes before gradually dissolving into the air. The footage is real. The ring is real. You can search it right now and watch it yourself. Russian officials landed on burning grass, which would be a reasonable explanation if burning grass had ever, at any point in recorded human history, produced a rotating geometric ring that maintained perfect circular structure against wind and atmospheric pressure at altitude. What makes it worse is that this wasn't a one-time event. Similar rings have been filmed above Chelyabinsk, above industrial zones in the Urals. Each time, the same pattern. Footage spreads, officials offer an explanation that falls apart under basic physics, and the story quietly dies. Russia has never commissioned a single public study into what produces these formations. For a country with one of the most aggressive atmospheric research programs on the planet, that indifference is its own kind of answer.
Number 12. Boris Kiprianovich, the Mars Boy, Russia. In 1996, a child was born in Volsky who should not have been able to know the things he knew. By the age of 2, Boris Kiprianovich, known publicly as Boriska, was describing the internal structure of spacecraft. By 4, he was drawing technical diagrams that confused aerospace engineers. Not scribbles, not imagination. Diagrams with proportional accuracy, labeled systems, and spatial logic that adults who had spent careers in theoretical physics found genuinely difficult to dismiss. His parents were not scientists. They had not taught him any of it. And when interviewers sat with Boris on camera, footage that still exists and is fully searchable, he explained calmly and without hesitation that he remembered living on Mars, that he had died there, that the civilization he came from had been destroyed by a catastrophic war that stripped the planet of its atmosphere and forced survivors to flee to other worlds. He described the geography of ancient Mars with specificity that matched geological models that hadn't been published in any medium a Russian child in the 90s could have accessed. Russian state television interviewed him, independent journalists documented him, the footage is archived and real, and the scientific community, which briefly paid attention, quietly stepped back without ever producing a formal debunking that could survive scrutiny. Boris is an adult now. He went quiet years ago, but the recordings exist, and no one has ever explained in terms that actually hold how a 4-year-old in Volsky knew what he knew.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Number 11. Dancing Forest, Kaliningrad, Russia. There is a forest on the Koronian Spit in Kaliningrad where the trees do not grow the way trees are supposed to grow. They spiral, they twist, they curl into rings and bend at right angles and double back on themselves in shapes that look less like natural growth and more like something tried to tie them into knots. Some trunks form complete loops before continuing upward. Some grow in corkscrew patterns so tight and so perfect they look carved. You can go there right now. Tourists visit it. Photographs of it cover travel blogs and scientific publications alike. It is completely, undeniably real, and no one can fully explain it. The leading hypotheses involve wind patterns, a specific moth that disrupts the growth hormone in saplings, and soil composition anomalies. Each theory explains part of the distortion. None of them explains why every single abnormality is contained within a specific, defined area, and why the trees directly outside that boundary grow with complete normality. The border is sharp, it is not a gradient. something inside that zone affects growth in a way that stops precisely where the zone ends. Local legends say the forest was a sacred site where the ground itself was altered by events too old for written record. Scientists say they're still working on it. Both answers are, in their own way, completely honest.
Number 10. Chelyabinsk meteor, Russia, 2013. On February 15, 2013, the sky above Chelyabinsk turned white. Not gradually, instantly. A fireball moving at 19 kilometers per second entered the atmosphere and released an energy equivalent to 30 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. And it did it in the air, above a city of over 1 million people, before anyone on Earth had detected it coming. The dashcam footage is some of the most terrifying video ever captured in the modern era. Dozens of cars recorded it simultaneously. The shockwave shattered windows across a 2,000 square kilometer area. Nearly 1,500 people were injured. Buildings lost entire walls. A factory roof collapsed. And here's the part that never gets enough attention. No space agency on the planet saw it coming. Not NASA, not ESA, not Roscosmos. The most sophisticated asteroid detection networks in human history were completely blind to an object that entered the atmosphere in broad daylight and hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. The impact crater at Lake Chebarkul is real and photographed. A fragment weighing over 600 kilograms was recovered from the lake floor on camera. It sits in a museum in Chelyabinsk right now. Scientists call it a one-in-a-century event. What they don't say loudly enough is that the exact same thing could happen tomorrow over any city on Earth, and we would have the same warning we had in 2013, which was none.
Number 9. Dyatlov Pass Incident, Russia, 1959. 9 trained Soviet hikers entered the Ural Mountains in January 1959 and never came back the way they left. They were found weeks later in conditions that investigators, even 60 years later, cannot fully account for. The tent had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped, cut, as if they had needed to escape with such desperation that pulling a zipper was not fast enough. They fled into temperatures of minus 30 degrees Celsius, without boots, without proper clothing, without equipment. Some of them ran over a kilometer from the tent before dying of hypothermia. Others had injuries that told a different story entirely. One hiker had a fractured skull consistent with the force of a car crash with no external wounds. 2 others had crushed rib cages, the kind of internal trauma typically associated with extreme pressure events, not falls on flat terrain. One woman was missing her tongue, her eyes, her lips. Not from scavenging animals, the tissue removal was specific and clean in ways that no wildlife feeding pattern produces. The Soviet government classified the investigation. The case file was sealed for decades. When Russia partially declassified documents in 2019, they still did not include the full forensic reports. The photographs from the recovery operation are real. The autopsy reports are partially public. The tent, cut from the inside, is documented. And the official conclusion? An unknown compelling force is the actual language used by Soviet investigators. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the government's own answer.
Number 8. Potomsky Crater, Siberia, Russia. Deep inside the taiga of Irkutsk Oblast, there is a crater that geologists have been arguing about since 1949 and still cannot explain. It is 40 meters tall. It is 160 meters in diameter. It looks from the air like a volcanic cone, except there is no volcanic activity anywhere near it. It looks like a meteor impact site, except the surrounding terrain shows none of the shock patterns that meteor strikes produce. It looks like nothing that any natural geological process on record should have created in the middle of Siberian forest. The local Yakut people refused to approach it for generations. They called it the Fire Eagle's Nest. They said animals avoided it and that the area around it felt wrong in a way they couldn't describe with language. Soviet geologist Vadim Kolbakov found it in 1949 and immediately recognized that it fit no category in his training. Expeditions that followed in the 2000s collected soil samples that came back with anomalous radiation readings and magnetic field irregularities that remain unexplained. The tree rings around the crater show a growth acceleration that began sometime in the mid-1800s, as if something happened beneath the surface that dramatically changed the local energy environment. Aerial photographs of it are publicly available. The crater is real. The science around it is incomplete, unresolved, and quietly unsettling.
Number 7. Yamal Peninsula Sinkholes, Russia. In 2014, reindeer herders in the Yamal Peninsula looked across the Siberian tundra and saw a hole in the earth that had not been there the day before. A perfectly cylindrical pit, 30 meters wide, dropping over 50 meters straight down.
No debris field around it, no scattered rock, no blast pattern. The edges were smooth. Whatever created it did not explode outward, it opened downward, as if the ground had simply decided to swallow itself. Then more appeared. Over a dozen confirmed sinkholes have been documented across the Yamal and Taimyr peninsulas since 2014. Satellite imagery captured their sudden appearance. Scientists from Russia's Arctic Research Institute flew helicopters over them and descended into several on ropes. The footage is real, available, and deeply strange. The prevailing scientific theory involves methane buildup in the permafrost, gas pressure accumulating as the ground warms until the surface simply blows inward, which explains the mechanism. It does not explain why the interiors of these holes glow faintly blue at certain depths, a detail that appears in multiple expedition reports but receives almost no formal scientific attention. The Yamal Peninsula is one of Russia's most critical natural gas territories. Independent researchers have extremely limited access to the active sinkhole sites. The holes keep appearing. The permafrost underneath them is changing faster than any model predicted, and the thing sitting inside the Earth that those holes are releasing into the atmosphere is invisible, odorless, and contributes to warming at a rate 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. The holes are not the threat. What's coming out of them is.
Number 6. Tunguska Explosion, Siberia, Russia, 1908. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, something hit Siberia with a force that flattened 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers of forest and sent a shockwave around the planet twice. People 80 kilometers away were knocked off their feet, windows shattered hundreds of miles from the impact point. The night sky over Europe glowed bright enough to read by for days afterward. Seismic stations across Russia registered an event they initially thought was a major earthquake. There was no crater. Whatever hit Siberia that morning detonated in the air above the forest, an airburst of between 10 and 15 megatons of energy, roughly 1,000 times the power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The scale of destruction is documented by photographs taken by the first scientific expedition to reach the site in 1927. The images show a forest flattened in every direction from a central point, trees stripped to bare poles and lying in radio patterns like matchsticks. Over a century later, there is still no scientific consensus on exactly what caused it. The most accepted theory is a meteoroid or comet that disintegrated before impact, but no confirmed fragment of meaningful size has ever been recovered from the site, despite over a dozen major expeditions. Something hit Siberia with the power of a nuclear weapon and left no physical evidence of itself behind. The photographs prove the damage was real. The absence of a cause is what no one can fully close the book on.
Number 5. Lake Baikal Soviet USO sightings, Russia. Lake Baikal is the deepest lake on Earth. It holds 20% of all the liquid fresh water on the planet's surface. It reaches depths of over 1,600 meters, deep enough to swallow the Empire State Building and still have room above it. And Soviet military divers reported something living in it that the USSR classified for decades. The documents were partially declassified after the fall of the Soviet Union. What they describe is a series of encounters in the 1980s in which military divers operating at depth in Baikal encountered figures in the water. Humanoid, roughly 3 meters tall, moving without equipment at depths that would require advanced technical diving gear to survive. Silver suits, no visible breathing apparatus. When Soviet commanders ordered a team of 7 divers to pursue and capture one of the figures, all 7 were hit simultaneously by an unknown force and shot upward toward the surface. 4 of them survived. 3 did not. The survivors required decompression treatment for weeks. The documents are real. They were reported by Russian media outlets after declassification. Military witnesses are named. The incident at Lake Baikal is not folklore. It is a classified Soviet military event that became partially public. And whatever those divers encountered in the dark water at that depth, the USSR's response was to classify it, bury it, and never formally acknowledge what happened to the 3 men who didn't come back up.
Number 4. Yucca Woolly Mammoth, Siberia, Russia. In 2010, Russian scientists pulled a body from the Siberian permafrost that was 39,000 years old and looked like it had died last Tuesday. Yucca, a juvenile woolly mammoth, fur still intact, skin holding its form, blood vessels not fully collapsed, muscle tissue preserved at a level that modern science cannot replicate in a laboratory with modern technology. Photographs of her are available. She has been exhibited publicly. The preservation is as extraordinary as every report claims. But the cuts are what made every
everything stop. Researchers documented wounds along Yuka's body that were clean, deliberate, and surgical in their pattern. Not claw marks, not puncture wounds from tusks or teeth. Straight, precise incisions of the kind that require a tool and a conscious decision to make. Something with hands and intent had cut into this animal's body tens of thousands of years ago. The scientific debate around those marks is real and ongoing. Some researchers argue for primitive human hunting. Others say the precision and placement don't match any known prehistoric butchering technique. Russian authorities restricted access to the full forensic documentation shortly after the wound analysis was completed. The public-facing research focuses on her extraordinary preservation. The questions around what exactly made those cuts and what that implies about who or what was operating in Siberia 39,000 years ago remain officially unanswered.
Number 3. Bataya Gaika Crater, Siberia, Russia. The Earth in Siberia is eating itself open, and it is doing it faster every single year. The Bataya Gaika crater in the Sakha Republic is over 1 kilometer long. It drops nearly 100 meters into the permafrost, and it grows, not by centimeters, not gradually, but by dozens of meters annually. NASA satellite imagery documents its expansion in time-lapse that looks less like geology and more like something tearing through the ground from below. The Yakut people call it the gateway to the underworld. They say the sounds that rise from it at night are not natural, a deep mechanical groaning that locals describe as enormous structures moving beneath the Earth's surface. That part is folklore. What isn't folklore is this. Multiple research drones sent into the crater have experienced total electronic failure the moment they descend past a certain depth. Field teams have reported systematic equipment malfunction at the crater's edge, compasses spinning, recording devices failing, communication cutting out. The formal expedition reports contain these details. They are documented. As the permafrost collapses, it releases material that has been frozen since before modern humans existed. Ancient viruses, bacteria sealed in ice for tens of thousands of years. Some of that material is now exposed to open air for the first time in recorded history. Russian scientists call it a thermokarst depression caused by climate change, which is true. That is what is causing it. But thermokarst depressions don't make sounds, they don't interfere with electronics, and they don't grow at the rate Bataya Gaika grows and keep accelerating. The crater is real, photographed from orbit, expanding right now, and the question of what it is uncovering underneath has no public answer.
Number 2. Alashenka, Kishtim, Russia, 1996. A woman found something on the ground near a cemetery in Kishtim, Russia in 1996. She thought it was a sick infant. She took it home. She cared for it for weeks. It was not an infant. Tamara Prosvernina is a real person. The town of Kishtim is real. The photographs of what she found are real and have been circulating since the 90s. You can look at them right now and spend a significant amount of time unable to fully process what you're seeing. The body was approximately 10 centimeters long. Brown-gray skin dried to the consistency of leather. A skull massively disproportionate to the body. Eyes round, oversized, and fixed open. No ears, no nose cartilage, no navel. That last detail is the one doctors could not move past. Every mammal that develops inside a placental host has a navel. Every single one, without exception. What Tamara found had no navel, which means anatomically it could not have developed inside any known biological host in any known reproductive process. Physicians who examined the body before it was taken confirmed the bone structure matched no human developmental abnormality in any medical record. It was not a deformed fetus. It was not a known animal. It matched nothing. Kishtim sits 14 kilometers from the Mayak nuclear facility, the site of the 1957 Kishtim disaster, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, classified by the Soviet government for 30 years. The photographs exist. The medical testimonies exist. The body vanished before complete analysis could be performed. Tamara Prosvernina died shortly afterward in circumstances her family described as unexplained. And whatever was in those photographs has never been formally identified by any institution that has looked at them.
Number 1. Kola Super Deep Borehole, Russia. Russia decided to drill straight into the Earth. 24 years, 12 kilometers down, the deepest hole any human civilization has ever made. Then they stopped, bolted a rusted metal cap over it, and walked away. The official reason was funding, but the researchers who worked there gave a different answer in archived interviews. They said the last readings from the deepest sensors were so wrong, so structurally impossible, that the team genuinely didn't know what they were measuring anymore. On the way down,
Everything the Soviet geological models predicted turned out to be false. Rock that should have been solid was flowing like plastic. Water at depths where water cannot physically exist. Microscopic fossils 6 kilometers underground, sealed inside rock that predates complex life on Earth's surface. Then the temperature hit 180 degrees Celsius, twice what they expected. The drill was melting before it could cut. They sealed it in 1994. A rusted cap, a decaying facility, a peninsula most people can't find on a map. Russia drilled deeper into this planet than any nation in history, found things that destroyed what we thought we knew about what's underneath us, and bolted the door shut. Whatever is 12 kilometers below the surface is still there. The cap is still on, and nobody is going back down.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.